Hello there, little masters, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, we've got a dragon horde of the good stuff for you.
West Uhal, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the cram to my lembus, Alan Sisto.
So I keep good indefinitely, but I'm uninteresting, eh? Fine.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fine.
Well-preserved and bland. That's my co-host.
That really is me, actually, really. Oh, man. That hurts, Sean, that hurts.
Yeah, you know, it's said out of the utmost love and respect.
Of course it is. Well, folks, tonight we tackle Chapter 13 of The Hobbit, Not at Home. Finally, Thorin enters the mountain and beholds the treasure of his grandfather. But the treasure still isn't won yet, is it?
No, it absolutely is not. But that's not going to keep Thorin and Bilbo and a whole bunch of others from counting those chickens.
No, it isn't. They wouldn't want to disappoint us.
No,
but before we get into all that, we've got another segment of Philology Fair.
Yeah. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about a word that appears in this chapter for the first time. And it has the distinction of being the first Elvish word to have entered the Oxford English Dictionary.
Oh, my.
And right away, you should probably know what it is, because there really aren't that many Elvish words in The Hobbit.
No, that's true. And I think I know which one you're talking about, but why don't you end the suspense and tell us, Sean?
I will do that. The word is mithril.
Of course it is.
According to Ring of Words, the resource that I use every time I do this segment, just about, mithril first appeared in a supplement to the Oxford English Dictionary that was published in 1976. It's a really big dictionary. I mean, volumes and volumes, folks. So they update it in supplements.
It comes in a car.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's like, I don't even know how many volumes it is. It takes up a whole shelf at the library.
Yeah.
So they update it in supplements instead of creating an entirely new edition, an entirely new volume every time it's updated.
Libraries don't want to spend $18,000 on a new edition.
On a whole new set of books, right? Yeah. So in this 1976 supplement, it was first added, and it was defined as simply name given by J.R.R. Tolkien to a mythical precious metal, with the earliest recorded usage of it being a 1944 letter to Christopher Tolkien. After the publication of The Lord of the Rings, the word just took off, and I think anybody who has any experience of fantasy outside of Tolkien has seen it used somewhere, either spelled the way Tolkien did or spelled with a Y in there somewhere or with an A. I mean, I can think of probably every single fantasy game that's been released since the 60s has included some reference to it, either Dungeons and Dragons or World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, EverQuest, Elder Scrolls, Diablo, Guild Wars. The Bard's Tale. Does anybody but me remember that one?
Oh, man, are you kidding me? I remember it quite well. I remember using graph paper my freshman year of college in the dorm to make maps with my roommate as we went through the dungeons on my Commodore Amiga.
That's awesome.
But I digress.
Yeah. That was the game where I first heard of mithril and hobbits, I believe, because they used the word hobbit in that game.
Oh, that's right. They did. Mm-hmm. I don't think they were supposed to, but they did.
Probably not, no. But I think you could create a Hobbit thief or a Hobbit burglar or whatever they called it. Probably
Rogue,
not Hobbit
maybe.
burglar, that's too on the nose.
That would be just a little obvious.
But we do digress.
We do. As we'll talk about later, though the code itself was in the first edition of The Hobbit, Tolkien didn't call it mithril until he was writing The Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. The coat was simply silvered steel until the third edition of The Hobbit in 1966.
That's right, and I think that's why the earliest occurrence of it in the OED is actually that 1944 letter as opposed to, The Hobbit, because it wasn't in there at the time. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the word itself. So the name mithril actually comes from a couple of Sindarin roots. Myth, meaning gray, as in Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim. Of course. And ril, meaning brilliance, as in Silmaril, although that's, not to get too technical, but that's actually a Sindarinized, I guess you could say, form of the proper Quenya name.
Oh, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, and that's why you see like the plural form Silmarilli sometime.
Yeah.
I think that's actually the plural of the original.
Which I think I once pronounced Silmarilli.
Probably, but
because that's right. I'm just borrowing English rules for
probably not the biggest mistake that we made in a season 1 episode. But we had a few, folks.
More than a few.
But anyway, so that's where it comes from, basically gray and brilliance. And as Mithrandir, Gandalf, says in Fellowship of the Ring, the metal was also known by other names. It was also called Moria silver, because that was the only place you could get it. True silver. The authors of Ring of Words actually, interestingly, point out that the name True Silver kind of recalls Quicksilver, which is a medieval name for Mercury, which meant literally living silver.
Yeah. Well, fortunately for Bilbo, that similarity is name only. Can't imagine he'd want to wear a coat made of mercury.
No, that wouldn't be too good for his health.
No, or sanity, one would imagine. Mad Hatters, Mad Hobbits.
Yeah. He does love tea, though.
Yes, though it would also be a pretty useless piece of armor. It just, the arrows would just penetrate it like a liquid.
Like liquid, yeah.
Right, yeah, really useless. Oh, my armor's dripped off me again. What are we going to do about that? I'm feeling a little weird these days.
That was the first and last experiment with liquid
with
armor.
Mercury
that
armor.
Dwarves ever tried.
Now, before we get on with the discussion...
If the poison doesn't kill you, the arrows will.
There you go.
Please,
That was excellent. That was excellent. Well played. Now, before we get on with the discussion, and believe me, we have to eventually get on with the discussion, we have a quick, not so much a correction as a further explanation.
Yeah.
A couple of episodes back, we talked about the pagan treasure that the dragon in Beowulf was hoarding.
Yeah, and I talked about how the phrase pagan treasure, or heathen hoard, as we found it was in the original Old English.
You stole that from me. Heathen hoard. Yeah.
Sorry. Stole your thunder on that one.
You did.
I'll let you say it in Old English.
My one
like.
chance of Old English.
No, I'll let you say it in Old English.
Oh, okay.
That phrase actually convinced me that the dragon wasn't just like a force of nature or, like a beast, that it was truly evil.
Right.
But as it turns out, there's probably a little bit more here than meets the eye, isn't there?
There really is. One of our listeners, Derek in the UK, pointed out that the pagan treasure, or heathen hoard, is less a reference to the evil nature of the dragon and is in actual fact a reference to the pagan tradition of burying treasure with their dead. We have to keep in mind that the writer of Beowulf is a Christian who's relating this older pagan story to a recently Christianized audience. And so you can see why he's having to reference this practice as being pagan.
A fantastic catch. And I have to say thank you, Derek, for that.
Yeah.
While I knew the facts that Alan just pointed out about, Christian writer, pagan story, never really thought about that. So
yeah, I'd forgotten about that too.
Great catch. Thank you, Derek. And here, just a little PSA for everybody. Folks, don't be shy about calling us out on stuff.
No.
Especially if you happen to have a degree in ancient and medieval history.
Well, yeah.
As this particular listener did. Anytime. Call us out. We're just kind of, I wouldn't say we're making it up as we go along.
We're not making it up. I knew you were going to say that. I'm like, dude, we are not making this up as we go.
We're not making it up as we go along, but we're just talking. We're just two guys.
That's true. And sometimes, especially when we digress, or especially when we kind of go off on a tangent we weren't planning on.
Like I'm doing now.
Like we're doing right now. Yeah. Operating on the high wire without a safety net, we might make a mistake. So
we do sometimes, but no, we actually spend quite a bit of time prepping for these episodes.
More than quite a bit. Talk to our families about that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the chapter, right?
Let's do that, please. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, before we actually get to the text, I really wanted to talk a little bit about the cool title of this chapter, Not at Home.
Okay.
This is one of those things where, as I was starting to kind of think that through, lo and behold, I read in Olson that he kind of already thought of what I thought of. So I have to give a hat tip to him.
That tends to happen sometimes. Yep.
Yeah. And he has some really good stuff to say on this. I mean, obviously, there's the clear reference that Smaug's not here. Dodged a bullet.
Right, sure.
But what that means, if you think that through, is the assumption is that it is still Smaug's home and not that of the dwarves. So, that's really key. We're talking about Smaug's not at home. This is his home. Interestingly, Thorin thinks he's home. And you'll see throughout the chapter little bits and pieces of that, like when they get to the big chamber and he's talking about, how this is a place where this happens. And, of course, it's really just a place where there's a whole bunch of dead bones and, ashen, corpses. And,
it's still a dragon's lair, clearly.
Yeah. And Bilbo keeps reminding him that he's not at home. Well, I'll stop just jabbering and I'll read you what Olson had to say because it's really good. Thorin starts referring to the darkened halls as my palace. As they are walking through a ruined chamber filled with charred benches, rotting tables, and scattered skulls and bones, Thorin announces that they have arrived at Thror's great hall of feasting and council. Bilbo, by contrast, refers to the place as a nasty, clockless, timeless hole. When Thorin laughingly defends it, replying, "Don't call my palace a nasty hole. You wait till it's been cleaned and redecorated," Bilbo again attempts to puncture his enthusiasm and his fine visions by reminding him that won't be till Smaug's dead. Thorin may think of the mountain halls as his palace, but Bilbo reminds him of their current owner when he calls the front gate of Thorin's kingdom Smaug's front doorstep. Bilbo steadfastly refuses to leave the dragon out of his calculations, as we know you should.
Right. So as he frequently is, the one kind of the voice of reason in this party.
Exactly.
and reminding them that the dragon is still here and something that
it's his home. It's his home now. And that's the thing. Thorin keeps thinking he's home. Bilbo's like, no, you're not. You're not.
And I wonder if the reason that Bilbo is the one that's the most aware of this is because he's the one that is absolutely not at home.
That's exactly what I was
He's the one
next.
that is the most clearly not at home. I remember back in, I think, episode 76, we talked about the fact that, Bilbo is going to get to the mountain. He still has to go back. Mm-hmm. The dwarves, this is their destination. And so he's
only halfway there.
They may think that, they may feel like that they're home now, even though they haven't won it yet. But Bilbo knows that his journey is only halfway over, so...
Yeah,
it's a very interesting double meaning to the title, though, that I had never
really almost a triple
meaning
because Bilbo's not at home,
that's true.
Thorin's not at home, and Smaug's not at home.
Yeah, good point.
So it's really
cool.
it's a really neat little kind of sidebar already before we even started to read, but we wanted to point that out.
It's a pre-bar.
Pre-bar, there you go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read. I'm not going to read the first paragraph. I'm going to read the second paragraph on for a little bit about this descent into darkness. So,
okay.
Thorin spoke. "Let us try the door," he said. "I must feel the wind on my face soon or die. I think I would rather be smashed by Smaug in the open than suffocate in here." So several of the dwarves got up and groped back to where the door had been. But they found that the upper end of the tunnel had been shattered and blocked with broken rock. Neither key nor the magic it had once obeyed would ever open that door again. "We are trapped," they groaned. "This is the end. We shall die here." But somehow, just when the dwarves were most despairing, Bilbo felt a strange lightening of the heart, as if a heavy weight had gone from under his waistcoat. "Come, come," he said. "While there's life, there's hope, as my father used to say, and third time pays for all. I am going down the tunnel once again. I've been that way twice, when I knew there was a dragon at the other end, so I will risk a third visit when I'm no longer sure. Anyway, the only way out is down, and I think this time you'd better all come with me." In desperation they agreed, and Thorin was the first to go forward by Bilbo's side. "Now, do be careful," whispered the hobbit, "and as quiet as you can be. There may be no Smaug at the bottom, but then again there may be. Don't let us take any unnecessary risks." So, I probably should have set the stage before I read that, talking about how we think that, they feel like days and days have passed.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
We will find out later.
We find out later on how much time has actually passed, and it's not exactly days and days. It's what, 2 days, 2 nights,
Two nights and a day. That's a darn long time to be sitting in a dark passage. I will tell you that.
It is a long time, certainly, but it's not days and days and days.
No, not days and days. But it is a good long chunk of time. Claustrophobia, can't blame him. I probably would have gone there a lot sooner than 2 nights and a day.
Perhaps, I'm sure I would have. Yeah.
Scratching at the rock.
Just thinking about some of this stuff. Just gives me a little claustrophobia.
Yeah, no air, no real airflow, just unpleasant.
Well, and you see, I mean, the dwarves really do despair. You know, and
true despair.
Not only is Thorin the one who is, kind of losing it a little bit.
Yeah, just a little.
Got to feel the wind on my face or I'm going to die. But then, the dwarves just go into, this is the end. We're going to die.
Yeah, we're going to die here.
And the narrator even tells us they're despairing. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that dwarves, who live underground would be the
you'd
ones
think this wouldn't bother them at all.
to lose it. You'd think that they wouldn't get bothered as quickly,
Yeah, maybe not at all. Maybe not at all is kind of the wrong way to put it, but certainly compared to a surface dweller, you'd think that they would be okay with this.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly their infravision would get them by. They could probably read by it.
It's apparently dark vision now, as I was told.
I know. I'm sorry, I'm an old man. It's
me too.
no,
I think it was Jeff who told. Well, of course it was Jeff who told me.
Of course it was Jeff.
That they haven't had infravision since I think 3rd edition.
Yeah, our resident D&D expert.
Our D&D consultant.
Yes, absolutely. Who will now become insufferable after this mention.
I told you guys already. There's no infravision. It's dark vision.
I know. Interestingly, so the dwarves despair, but Bilbo doesn't.
Yeah.
And I love this. We get more paternal wisdom. This is just so cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But does anybody else think this quote sounds familiar? While there's life, there's hope. Book 4, Chapter 7 of Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
Sam says that his gaffer said the exact same thing. So apparently,
really,
it's a fair. Yeah.
Wow, that's a good catch.
Yeah. I remember thinking, golly, that sounds familiar. And I couldn't remember exactly where, but I thought it was Lord of the Rings. So I did a little, thank goodness for ebooks, and found it in Book 4, Chapter 7.
And I would imagine the gaffer probably picked it up from Bilbo or from Bungo.
Bilbo's dad. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Isn't it cool?
That is very cool. And I love the fact that we get the word hope and the word despair in such sharp contrast so close together. I think that's really neat and a really key thing that Tolkien's kind of pointing us to here.
Absolutely. Okay, so Frodo, Sam, and Gollum are in Ithilien. They're actually on their way down to the crossroads, and Gollum's off hunting. And so Sam, wonders where he is. Frodo's, wondering where he is. And they hear Mount Doom, apparently, a rolling and rumbling noise. Frodo says that I think we're in for trouble anyhow. Our journey is drawing to an end. And Sam, ever hopeful Sam, says, maybe, but where there's life, there's hope, as my gaffer used to say. And need of victuals, as he most ways used to add. You have a bite, Mr. Frodo, and then a bit of sleep. So where there's life, there's hope. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it is very likely that he picked up that line from either Bilbo or from Bungo.
Yeah.
So
that's really
paternal
cool.
wisdom. I love that.
Very cool. And need of victuals, of course.
Oh, victuals. Well, yeah.
Bilbo's starting to get used to not having victuals, so I guess he's not bothering to point that out.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and of course the gaffer, if he's talking about victuals, he's talking about potatoes. So.
Of course. Potatoes. Taters.
Ballast, right fine ballast for
That's right.
For an empty stomach. And the despair thing reminds me also of a little bit out of Lord of the Rings. Remember Gandalf's discussion in the Council of Elrond chapter, where he talks about despair. And he's talking about, this seems like folly or despair if it weren't for Master Elrond. And Gandalf basically kind of chastises him and said, despair is for those who see the end beyond all doubt. And here we're seeing the dwarves despair, even though they don't see the end beyond all doubt. This is kind of a reminder, hey, don't go there. You don't need to go there yet. Interestingly, though, that quote, where there's life, there's hope, actually goes back to a real-world quote, just like some of these other ones have, that's actually credited to the Roman orator Cicero. It's an original form in a letter to a friend of his.
We were talking about that. Yeah.
While the sick man has life, there is hope. Mm-hmm. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That was very cool. Tolkien had this way of just weaving in all these different...
like frying pan, out of the frying pan into the fire. Yeah. Remember how we found out how old that went back?
Right, yeah.
And then this moment about the strange lightning. Sean, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it seems like this might be right at the same time that Smaug is getting killed.
It's kind of what I'm thinking, too.
I don't really have any proof for that, but it seems like it could be when you look
works.
That's what I'm thinking, because I know later on we get that it was... we know something like 11 days passes between the death of Smaug and when the Lake Towners actually show up here at the Lonely Mountain. Mm-hmm. So this has been a couple of days.
This has. I think the way I see it is the timeline fix is what we end up in the next chapter about how the men talk about the light and how there had been light the night before.
Right, yeah.
I can't recall. We'll see that in the next chapter. And what we realize then is we're talking about the two different times that Smaug has come out. The first was the time to hunt,
right.
And then the next time was when he just smashed the whole side of the mountain.
Right. Yeah, that's probably it.
And that timeline really fits because if it was the second one, it was right after he'd smashed the mountainside, and then he heads over.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm glad that you had the data to back it up because I just kind of felt like, well, what else could it be? There's no other real explanation for it.
No, that's true. I mean, certainly it's the narrator hinting at that, even if there isn't a timeline match.
And because the lightening of his heart happens before he gives this great quote from his father. If he had given the quote from his father and then felt the lightning after that, you could just think it's just a coincidence. Like, that's saying always
that
picks
gave
me
him
up,
encouragement or something.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's clearly not the case because he felt it before.
I agree. I thought it was interesting that Thorin was the first one to join Bilbo when Bilbo said, let's go down. That was another good moment for Thorin.
Yeah. He's had a few.
Yeah, he's about to have another bad one, as the case may be.
When they get to the bottom. Yeah.
His good moment is very short-lived.
Yeah.
Dwarves not very stealthy, are they?
No, not at all. I mean, great deal of puffing and shuffling, and the echoes don't make it any better. I know. I kind of wish we had actually read that passage, but
I know.
This chapter, there's a lot of reading. We can't read the whole thing. We can't read the whole thing.
No. Actually, both these chapters, there's a lot of reading because these are shorter chapters. And so there's a lot of stuff to read, and it's a very kind of event-heavy narrative, so we want to make sure we cover a lot of it. But
I guess I would say this much. It's probably just as well that the dwarves couldn't be stealthy because it wouldn't have done much good once Bilbo stumbled and rolled out into the hall.
Yeah. Ooh.
Which is a hilarious moment, I have to
It
say.
really is, only because he doesn't get eaten by a dragon. But yeah,
True.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a funny moment there.
Having him get eaten by a dragon would have changed it a bit. But
Yeah, it would have been a little less funny, or at least
Yeah.
for him. It depends on how you feel about him. It might still be funny if you're really, not exactly a fan.
all those people who got 13 chapters into The Hobbit and just aren't really a big fan of
All of a
Baggins.
sudden, they think they're reading a George R.R. Martin book, as all the main characters are dying.
Right, yeah.
So,
Well done. Nice. Oh, man.
worm stench. I
Worm
love
stench
that.
is still here.
Worm stench is different from worm sign, just to be clear.
Yes, it is, Usul. It is. This worm stench has been, we've had it a couple of times now, haven't
Yeah,
we? And
yeah.
I kept on thinking that it was mentioned in the Silmarillion. I looked, I didn't find it in the Silmarillion.
Okay.
No. Just
Maybe not as that phrase. Maybe we'll have to look for it as something else.
Yeah. I went back to the, even the
Reek.
stuff in, oh yeah, maybe I should have looked for Reek, yeah. I went back and reread the chapter after, when Hurin goes to Nargothrond after Turin's killed the dragon and looked for, because that's where I was thinking it was, it was after the dragon's gone. And I thought the stench still lingered, but I guess not. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, reek doesn't work, not for the dragon at least. I mean, there's the reek from Thangorodrim and things like that. There is dragon stench in Turin Bar. The
there?
horses were maddened by the dragon stench.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I
Yeah.
thought of that stench, but for some reason I was thinking it
And
kind
of course, he and Hunthor were nearly overcome by the heat and the stench.
there you go.
So
Yeah.
that would have been good.
I mean, there is a little bit about sort of the effect of the dragon lingering, which I think we will talk about a little bit
Yes.
later. But
Oh yeah. That's clear. I
Yeah.
can't recall, but yes, it's when Meme.
there's a
is
moment
in
with Meme that I think I've
and
got
then when
in my notes
Hurin
for
comes
later.
back to the halls, and
Yeah, I think I've got that in my notes for later. But I don't know. For some reason, I said a couple of episodes ago that I thought for sure that they mentioned the dragon stench, and no, it's not there.
No, not there.
So sorry,
That's okay.
it happens.
I do love Bilbo's bold call out.
Yes,
Confound
Smaug, you
Smaug,
worm. Yeah, I love that.
That's
It's
awesome.
so great.
That's gutsy, man. Go for it.
That is, yeah.
I mean, I guess he realizes, look, the fact is, I'm dead if he's here.
Yeah.
So I might as well at least see it coming,
Yeah.
Give me a line.
I know. Well, and Bilbo is his courage here. Not even really courage. It's boldness. I
It is
think
boldness, yeah.
is a better word than courage. His boldness really contrasts with the just utter cowardice of the dwarves
Totally.
that
yeah.
we're seeing here, and I think that's kind of neat.
Yeah, and we're going
But,
to see more of that here in a little bit.
Yeah, but he really is just like he's just defying his foe, almost playing a little mind game with him, and that's sort of become kind of one of his things, hasn't it? It's
Yeah,
one of
you're
his
right.
tactics.
Eat me if you can catch me. I think he probably
Yeah.
said that to the spiders, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Very much becoming one of his trademarks is to kind of taunt his enemies. Mm-hmm. In this case, his enemy doesn't hear it, but,
No, he doesn't
doesn't
know
change
that,
the
though.
courage it took to say it.
Right.
So, yeah, so he calls for a light, and then and then I'm going to have you read the next passage.
Yeah, I was just before we get to that, I was looking for. There it is. Before that, when he asks, "Can anybody make a light?" He says, "Perhaps we can make a little light and have a look round before the luck turns." I like the reference to luck because I remember in chapter 12 he
Yeah.
was beginning to trust his luck more than he used to, and now he's actually making an overt reference to the importance of luck in his quest.
And the
So-
realization that it's not going to last forever.
Yeah, good point. The luck will turn, won't it? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I wanted to call that out before I get to my passage,
Well, I'm glad you did.
and I will go ahead and read that now.
Okay.
The dwarves, of course, were very alarmed when Bilbo fell forward down the step with a bump into the hall, and they sat huddled just where he had left them at the end of the tunnel. "Shh! Shh!" they hissed when they heard his voice. And though that helped the hobbit to find out where they were, it was some time before he could get anything else out of them. But in the end, when Bilbo actually began to stamp on the floor and screamed out, "Light!" at the top of his shrill voice, Thorin gave way, and Owen and Glóin were sent back to their bundles at the top of the tunnel. After a while, a twinkling gleam showed them returning, Owen with a small pine torch alight in his hand, and Glóin with a bundle of others under his arm. Quickly Bilbo trotted to the door and took the torch, but he could not persuade the dwarves to light the others, or to come and join him yet. As Thorin carefully explained, Mr. Baggins was still officially their expert burglar and investigator. If he liked to risk a light, that was his affair. They would wait in the tunnel for his report. So they sat near the door and watched.
Do you have the TPS reports? It'd be great if you had that report.
it's the most officious little,
Isn't it?
little thing. Like, oh, well, you're the burglar. This is your job. You go and take care of that, would you?
Yeah, you just do your thing.
If you want the light, sure. Yeah, you're the burglar.
Yeah. But we're gonna wait here for your report.
Wait back here. Yeah.
I'll make my executive decisions when you come back with your report.
Right. Yeah.
Stapled with a cover sheet.
You gotta have the cover sheet, man.
Gotta have the cover sheet.
You don't have the cover sheet, he'll reject it.
Yeah, I think you need a cover sheet on this.
That would be great. Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah. With his coffee mug.
Oh, man. I had Office.
I haven't seen that movie in
man.
forever, Office Space.
All right. Before we go way down that road.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, man.
So Bilbo's out there. He's doing the work. He's the bold one. He's going out there. He's calling to them, give me some light. I need some help, guys. And they're just cowering in the dark.
Yeah. That's exactly what Olson says. He's got a short little quote I want to read here just because it's so damning to the dwarves.
Let's hear it.
The dwarves, on the other hand, opt for cowering. They are still huddling just where Bilbo left them. Rather than helping Bilbo or joining him in standing up to the enemy they say they want to take vengeance on, they desperately try to shush him. Thorin attempts to cloak his cowardice in formal language, carefully explaining that Mr. Baggins is still officially their expert burglar and investigator. He can use his own judgment in his professional capacity, and meanwhile, Thorin and the dwarves will fearlessly wait in the tunnel for his report.
Oh, yes, fearlessly waiting in the tunnel.
Fearlessly waiting in the tunnel.
It almost, not almost, I think it actually does make me feel like all his official language and this personality quirk that he has, it's a bit of a defense mechanism to hide the fact that he has no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, it's a cover. Yeah,
it really is.
And it's funny because he really does, in a way, get his just reward because of his cowardice. If just he had gone with Bilbo to go search this room a little bit, he would have found the Arkenstone. Story would have been radically different.
That is a very good point.
He stays behind, and his cowardice has consequences.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So they do see him on the Mound of Treasure. They see him looking around.
Again, I cannot imagine how much courage that takes to climb a mound of treasure that a dragon has been using as a bed.
Yeah. And that he might come back. He might not even be gone.
Yeah, right.
He might just be over in the study, paying the bills and reading a book, and he's going to come back to his bedroom.
He's doing his taxes. I mean, that's...
He is. You're right. They are.
It's that time of year.
That time of year.
Even dragons have to pay taxes. Actually, dragons probably don't. But no, it's just great. I mean, again...
Well, it depends. The wealth in his hoard has gained in capital gains, and he does have to file a form... Yeah.
Right. Who does your taxes, Smaug?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a complicated file.
He's probably not doing TurboTax. I'm
probably
pretty
not.
sure.
No, I don't think there's a TurboTax Dragon edition.
TurboTax Horde edition.
yeah. Horde there's not enough digits on the on the TurboTax version I use.
Yeah, definitely can't do that one. My goodness.
They should probably let you read some.
They do. I'm going to go ahead and read, and this is a really key passage. I can't wait. Yep. I just realized, we're going to read this, and then we're going to have like a 30-minute sidebar. We're going to have 5 minutes for the rest of the chapter, but we'll figure it out.
We'll manage.
So Bilbo finds something. What does he find? It was the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain. So Bilbo guessed from Thorin's description. But indeed, there could not be two such gems, even in so marvelous a hoard, even in all the world. Ever as he climbed, the same white gleam had shone before him and drawn his feet towards it. Slowly it grew to a little globe of pallid light. Now, as he came near, it was tinged with a flickering sparkle of many colors at the surface, reflected and splintered from the wavering light of his torch. At last he looked down upon it, and he caught his breath. The great jewel shone before his feet of its own inner light, and yet, cut and fashioned by the dwarves, who had dug it from the heart of the mountain long ago, it took all light that fell upon it and changed it into 10,000 sparks of white radiance, shot with glints of the rainbow. Suddenly Bilbo's arm went towards it, drawn by its enchantment. His small hand would not close about it, for it was a large and heavy gem, but he lifted it, shut his eyes, and put it in his deepest pocket. Now I am a burglar indeed, thought he. But I suppose I must tell the dwarves about it, sometime. They did say I could pick and choose my own share, and I think I would choose this if they took all the rest. All the same, he had an uncomfortable feeling that the picking and choosing had not really been meant to include this marvelous gem, and that trouble would yet come of it.
There's an understatement.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
What an incredible passage, though.
It really is, and he knows exactly what he's doing, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
You can't claim ignorance.
No.
Even though the Arkenstone has only been introduced to us a few pages ago.
That's true. I mean, we only heard of it just in the last chapter, right?
Right. But, it makes it very clear that Bilbo knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. He knows the value of this stone.
He knows the value. And he knows full well that he can't, kind of claim the technicality of, oh, well, they said I could choose my own share. Like, he knows that didn't include this.
No. No.
And that's interesting because you're seeing that this treasure is having an effect on him. It has a massive effect. He's making this choice knowing that it's the wrong choice.
And yet he also, in a way, I'm not going to say the choice was made for him because he did choose to do that, right? But look at the initial process, right? I mean, his arm went towards it drawn by its enchantment. There's definitely a power at work here.
That's true.
I'm not, again, he still has the ability to counter that. Yeah. But instead he closes his hand around it, lifts it, closes his eyes, and puts it in his pocket, and he knows full well. Yeah. So he can't. I
think the question is what power is drawing him. I mean, I guess it's enchantment. I guess that tells us what we need to know.
Yeah, by its enchantment. Yeah.
So it is just sort of this kind of a dwarvish treasure lust coming over him.
Yeah. And probably a much more intense version of that, given the beauty
object
of the stone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this line that there's no way there could be another gem as marvelous. Is this Bilbo's thought based on his limited experience of the world, or is this
I think
the narrator coming out and saying that?
Looking at the way that sentence is crafted, so Bilbo guessed from Thorin's description, but indeed there could not be two such gems, even in so marvelous. So I'm almost thinking it's that Bilbo would think that.
Yeah, that's probably it.
But I guess he could even if he went the other way, it's fine. Because remember, as we'll get to in a little bit, the Silmarils were not.
Well, I know. I don't think it has anything to do with the Silmaril, not a Silmaril question. I know people have used it as proof one way or the other.
Right, and we'll spend some time on that, a great deal of it.
But I think that I don't think that you need this as proof one way or the other. There's plenty of other reasons that we'll get into in a minute to say it's not a Silmaril. But I don't know. It was an interesting construction, and I'm wondering if it's...
It is an interesting construction.
But I think it is. I think you're right. I think it is Bilbo's own thought process coming to that conclusion.
There's no way to know quite for certain that could be a break. Certainly the way it's phrased when he says, but indeed, that does sound almost like maybe the narrator's saying that. In fact, there could not be these two identical gems. Yeah. I'm also not sure it matters, really, whether that's Bilbo's thought or the narrator's comment. We need to know that. We need to know that this is a truly, one-of-a-kind gem, whether Bilbo knows that or not.
You're right, and I think that's the key. Yeah.
The description, of course, it's shines from its own inner light. Boy, that does sound a little bit like the Silmaril, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But here's where you get the fact that it can't be, based on at least the description of a Silmaril in the Silmarillion, that it was cut and fashioned by the dwarves.
Right.
That is one way that you just
the Silmarillion, we were told clearly that...
Not possible.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely not.
I can't remember exactly the phrase now.
I know. I can't either. I'll try to look it up in a little bit. But I love this scale question that we get, or the scale answer, right? How big is it? It's big.
It really is big. That's another thing that tells me it's probably not a Silmaril, but...
Well, yeah, we don't know much about the size of those.
No, but we know that they're, they can be held in a crown.
That's true.
Well, I guess Morgoth's crown is a pretty big crown.
Crown, yeah. We know that Baron's hand closed around the Silmaril, because then
That's
the Silmaril glowed through his hand, so it could be about the same size.
Yeah.
Large and heavy, so his small hand can't close, but he can still grasp it well enough to get it into his pocket with one hand. He didn't need to pick it up with both hands. It's not like
and it actually fits in his pocket, which I think is telling.
So that gives us something. Now, Rateliff does tell us that Tolkien changed this line. It was larger than the Hobbit's small hand, and then it became larger than the Hobbit's small hand could close upon.
Okay.
So that was important.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's probably now is our time to kind of do the sidebar on the Arkenstone. There's a lot here.
I think so, yeah. And I think we need to start by pointing out that right up until the first typescript of the story, it wasn't actually the Arkenstone that Bilbo found. It was the Gem of Girion. And Rateliff actually walks us through the process that Tolkien went through to replace it with the Arkenstone, which we'll try to summarize here because it is actually really interesting, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, originally the notion was to have a gem that would serve as a portable 1/14th share of the treasure. But as the value and beauty of this gem grew each time Tolkien worked on the story, it became the thing that Thorin focused on, and by extension, the one thing he would have forbidden Bilbo to take as his share.
Right.
And here's actually the quote from Rateliff. In the original conception, the gem of Girion is so named because it was given by Girion, king of Dale, to the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain in payment for the arming of his sons. We are never told how it came into Girion's possession. And just as a new character had to be introduced to fill the role of Dragon Slayer, once Tolkien decided that it strained credulity to have little Bilbo in that role, Bard, whom Tolkien economically made the heir of Girion, thus opening up new plot threads and possibilities even as he resolved one issue, so too the elevation of the gem of Girion into the Arkenstone led to the introduction of the necklace of Girion to assume some of the plot elements no longer suitable for the original item as it had evolved. For example, it is no more plausible that a human king would surrender a wonder like the Arkenstone for his son and heir's armor, however finely wrought, than that Gollum's grandmother gave away rings of power as birthday presents, and the stories had to be changed to match the later conceptions.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, he creates the stone now as something found by the dwarves, not given by men, and so the name Gem of Girion had to go. And this is where we get to revisit something we talked about way back in Season 1 when we talked about the Silmarils.
Yeah, and this is always one of our favorite
It
topics
really
to go back to.
It's a fun one.
Going back to some of the early versions of the mythology that are published in the History of Middle-earth, the earliest version of the Annals of Valinor is what I'm thinking of here. In that, Tolkien has Elfwine, who's his fictional frame narrator for the First Age stories. He actually has him basically tell some of the stories of the elves in Old English. And he actually translates precious stones or holy stones as the Old English word Erklenstanis, or basically Arkenstones. It's sort of an early version of the word Arkenstones. This actually happens 3 times, including once in the Annals of Beleriand. But here's one quote. So this is from an entry for the year 2500, and I should point out that this is all given in Old English, and what I'm going to read here is actually just the translation of that. It basically says, "Here, through cunning craft and artistic skill, the Noldor elves devised and created many gems, and Feanor, the Noldor lord, wrought the Silmarils, that were precious or holy stones." And that's that word that's given as Erklenstanis, or Arkenstones.
Yeah.
This word Erklenstanis actually also appears in Beowulf to describe a jeweled necklace that's given to Beowulf. But Rateliff thinks Tolkien's source for this term lies in, and I'm going to go ahead and quote Rateliff here, Cyniwulf's Christ, or Christ, the same work from which he took the name Eärendil some 20 years earlier, where Erknanstan, precious or holy stone, appears in line 1194 as a metaphor for Christ. This is made somewhat more likely, Rateliff goes on, by the spelling found in Cyniwulf's poem, and the fact that words in Old English which began with EOR, like Errol and Eroth and Eranost, became EAR in modern English, so like Earl, Earth, Ernest.
Oh, okay.
Whereas words beginning with EAR typically became AR words, such as Eric, EARC became Ark, ARK, as in Noah's Ark.
Oh, okay.
So basically what Rateliff is saying there is the fact that Tolkien represented the first syllable of Arkenstone as ARK instead of EARK means that it was spelled EARC in Old English. I know that's like super word nerdy, but it's
as opposed to EORC, because if that was the case, then it would have ended up being
an
Arkenstone.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Kind of looking at the sound shifts, the regular sound shifts that Tolkien plays with.
Fascinating.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, and Rateliff goes on to point out, and I love this, despite the sense of he's talking here about the fate of the Silmarils and the fact that one ends up in the sea and one in the stars and one in the earth. Despite the sense of finality in the passage just quoted about the fate of the Silmarils, Tolkien had in fact at that point changed his mind 4 times in the previous 15 years about the Holy Jewel's fate, all in a series of unpublished works that remained in flux and were each to be replaced by a new version of the story. There's no way any observer at that time could have told that this one point would henceforward remain relatively fixed within the Silmarillion texts. The one constant had been that the story ended with all 3 of the jewels remote and inaccessible. Just as the sword of Turgon, king of Gondolin, had somehow survived the fall of his city, and found its way through the ages into that troll lair, and hence Blodorthin or Gandalf's hands, it's thus more than possible that Tolkien was playing in The Hobbit with the idea of having one of Feanor's wondrous jewels reappear, no doubt the one that had been thrown into a fiery chasm and lost deep within the earth, which is, after all, exactly where the dwarves find the Arkenstone, buried at the roots of an extinct volcano.
It's a good point.
It is.
And so, we're left with the question, so is the Arkenstone a Silmaril? Rateliff says, as elves often do, both yes and no.
Don't go to the Rateliff for counsel, huh?
Yeah. But what's really important here is that the yes can only exist in a world where the published version of the Silmarillion does not exist.
Right.
So the canonical answer, based on the texts we have from Tolkien, has to be no.
That's correct.
But at the same time, it seems clear that this tale of the Great Stones of the First Age inspired Tolkien in the name he gave to this stone. I think the best yes and no passage that Rateliff has here, I think I might have even read this one before. He says, by avoiding the use of the word Silmaril, and instead using the ingenious and agreeable synonym Arkenstone, Tolkien got to draw on his rich homebrew mythology, which by the early 1930s had developed a remarkable depth and sophistication, without worrying what the effect of his new story would be on that mythology. So he's kind of having it both ways. He's allowing himself to be inspired by his own story without making it the exact gem in the Silmarillion, because it can't be the exact gem in the Silmarillion.
No, it can't. You just wanted to include that, though, because it said homebrew, huh?
Totally, yeah. A nice, rich homebrew mythology sounds great right about now.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and get back to the text. I love that sidebar. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it is yes and no, but only in the context of at the time Tolkien wrote it, he may have been toying with that idea, but by the time things get finalized.
Right, and he may have, who knows if he would have made more changes to it, if he had had the time. But he didn't, and we're left with the Silmarillion that we're left with, and based on that text, this can't be a Silmaril.
That is correct. So we get back into the text, and we see that Bilbo gets to the other side. His torch is still visible, but barely. And then, of course, because wonderful things happen in a dark dragon's cave, a bat startles him, and he falls down, drops his torch.
You really don't like bats, do you? I've noticed.
I'm not a big bat guy. I'm not, no. No, in fact, I'm trying to figure out where that bridge is in Austin and whether I can rent a nearby flamethrower. But no, I kid.
We should get you out here. I'm
not going to. No.
If you come here and visit, it will finally give me an excuse to go there because I've never gone.
Okay, I'll go there with you. I will stay in the vehicle with the windows rolled up and the motor running, just so you know.
And the music playing really loudly so you can't even hear the squealing.
No, I don't mind. I'll listen to them. I'll look at them. That's great. I'll shine the high beams at them, but I will abandon you to their blood-sucking tendencies if they start flying towards me.
Fair enough.
Bye, Sean. Good knowing you. Need a new co-host.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
That is totally fair.
It'll be me against the Flittermice.
The Flittermouse. Oh no, Flittermouse.
Don't kill me. Remember Thuringwethel. All right.
All right.
Should I read my next passage?
I think you probably should, now that poor Bilbo's in the dark. The longer you wait, the longer he's in the dark.
Yes. All right. Let's get him out of there. The light's gone out. Someone come and find me and help me. For the moment, his courage had failed altogether. Faintly, the dwarves heard his small cries, though the only word they could catch was, "Help!" "Now what on earth or under it has happened?" said Thorin. "Certainly not the dragon, or he would not go on squeaking." Ouch, man, come on. They waited a moment or two, and still there were no dragon noises. No sound at all, in fact, but Bilbo's distant voice. "Come on, one of you, get another light or two," Thorin ordered. "It seems we have got to go and help our burglar." "It is about our turn to help," said Balin, "and I am quite willing to go. Anyway, I expect it is safe for the moment." Glóin lit several more torches, and then they all crept out, one by one, and went along the wall as hurriedly as they could. It was not long before they met Bilbo himself coming back towards them. His wits had quickly returned as soon as he saw the twinkle of their lights.
Yeah, I think that would help.
That would do it, yeah.
That would. That really would help. Because we did have that moment where his courage had failed altogether.
Altogether in the pitch dark. I mean, we saw how much courage he had.
Yeah.
And
calling out Smaug, being down there on his own.
That's all well and good as long as you've got light, but once you're in the dark, everything's a bit scarier, isn't it?
And far, far away from your help. Yeah. That would have been a little dicey.
Well, thankfully, Thorin, was, willing to show the grandiosity to actually go and help him.
Willing might be a strong word.
Thorin's really attitude
here absolutely
He really
stinks.
is not willing.
No.
He's really like the most begrudging. Oh, I guess we got to go help him again.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Do you not understand what your role is here, Thorin? What is Bilbo supposed to do for you besides everything?
Right.
I love Balin sort of chastises. Well, it is about our turn to help.
Yeah, Balin has frequently
Come
been
on.
sort of the conscience of the group here. And
Yes, that's he really is. He is the conscience of the group. That's a very good way to put it.
certainly as it relates to Bilbo, Balin's just got a spot in his heart for Bilbo.
He does.
He recognizes his importance.
Yes, I think he does.
Yeah. So they go out. Bilbo sees the lights, and then
Well, he explains what happened, that basically it was just a bat and a drop torch. And then, of course, he doesn't say anything about the Arkenstone, kind of like when he came out and didn't say anything about the ring.
right, yeah,
And at this point now, because they all have their torches, they start to see the treasure, and they're going to start exploring the hall. So I'm going to pick up right there.
All right.
The mere fleeting glimpses of treasure, which they had caught as they went along, had rekindled all the fire of their dwarvish hearts. And when the heart of a dwarf, even the most respectable, is wakened by gold and by jewels, he grows suddenly bold, and he may become fierce. The dwarves indeed no longer needed any urging. All were now eager to explore the hall while they had the chance, and willing to believe that, for the present, Smaug was away from home. Each now gripped a lighted torch, and as they gazed, first on one side and then on another, they forgot fear and even caution. They spoke aloud and cried out to one another as they lifted old treasures from the mound or from the wall and held them in the light, caressing and fingering them. Oh boy. Yeah, they're starting to get that dwarvish thing going.
They've gone too far the other way now, haven't they? They've gone from cowardice to not just not afraid, but they're not even being careful.
And no caution. This is really an intriguing shift, but it's a shift that once again is caused by
The treasure.
not their own courage, but by the treasure. The treasure rekindles this fire.
I have to feel like that's an intentional comparison. There's dragonish language there.
Yes,
the fire
there
of
is.
their hearts.
That's exactly right.
The
the fierceness.
They become fierce. Yeah.
Yeah, they're absolutely
awakened by gold and jewels. We saw Smaug sleeping, not sleeping earlier.
Yeah, that's true. Sleeping, not sleeping.
Yeah,
That's a
there's
good point.
definitely there's a little dragon that's awakening in the dwarves here as they see this treasure.
Yeah, it's an amazing moment.
And so it's a little hint of darkness and what seems like a fairly happy scene.
Right.
They're, and certainly as we'll see even in the next paragraph, which I know we're not going to read, but the merry mood, the music and everything, it's kind of a happy scene. But there's
I think it makes sense that the youngest feel a little bit less, feel a little bit more merry than the others.
Yeah.
They're maybe a little less tinged by the
by greed.
By this greed.
Yeah, that could be. But since it's been mentioned at the beginning, this this boldness and this potential for fierceness, I think we're just a little bit of darkness in this.
Yeah, it's like a slight foreboding.
A bit of foreboding. Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Yes, they do.
I love that Feely and Keely start playing magic harps. I mean, what a beautiful moment this must have been. Can you imagine hearing that sound echoing through the halls? I mean, in this case, they really have forgotten caution, haven't they? Because if the dragon's around, he's going to hear that.
He's going to hear the sound of dwarvish harps being played.
Yeah. And they're still in tune because they're magical.
They keep their tune. I know. I wish I could get my son one of those so I don't have to tune his violin every time he practices.
I thought you were going to say tune his harp. I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool.
No, he's not there yet. Maybe someday.
Violin.
Maybe not. Violin's easy to store. I don't have to find a place for a harp.
Yeah. Yeah. If my son wants to play the harp, I'm going to give him a piccolo. Here you go, buddy.
There you go. Here.
Yeah, you can fit this anywhere. I like that.
Yeah.
No, you cannot play bass. No. Timpani? No, you can't.
No more grand pianos in the house.
No. Well, we only have room for two.
Oh, do you guys already have a grand piano?
No, are you kidding me?
I was going to say. Well, that's why it didn't sound totally outlandish to me, but it's like, really, a grand? Wow. Okay.
That was the whole point. It was supposed to sound.
Way to go, sistos! I'm impressed.
Oh yes, we have two grand pianos, but we need your help to get to Mythmoot. No.
Right.
No.
Sell your piano, Alan.
Seriously, dude. No.
I'll buy you a 49-key Casio. You can play that instead.
Oh, goodness. And we digress once again.
We do once again.
So, interesting. While Fili and Kili are being a little less impacted by the dwarven greed and are playing music and being merry almost, the other dwarves are being a little bit less merry and a little more practical. They're jamming as much. This is like the Golden Corral, all you can shove in your pockets.
They're stuffing popcorn shrimp in their pockets.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is like the all you can stuff gold buffet.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's greed.
That stuff will break your teeth, man. Come on.
And you know, I love this. What they couldn't carry, they let it fall back through their fingers with a sigh.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. If you make it back here and kill the dragon, this is all yours.
This is yours. What? Yeah. Like,
what are you going to do with it?
I mean, where do you need to take this?
Do you have a magic bag of holding?
Either the dragon is going to be taken care of, and you're not going to need to get it out.
Yeah.
Or
you're going.
The dragon's
going
to come back, and you're not going to be alive.
Yeah, and you won't have the fingers to worry about.
So you don't need to stuff it in your pockets. You don't need the bag of holding.
You'll have no pockets or fingers.
Right. Or fingers.
Nor will you be able to sigh.
No. Or spend your money.
Yeah. This is really kind of just not really thinking it through.
It is not thinking it through, and I think that tells us more than anything that they're just, gold, gotta have it. You know,
gold,
it's just
more gold.
It's just an instinctual reaction.
That's a good way of putting it. Instinctual. Yeah. It is base. It definitely reaches that lower level.
Yeah, yeah.
Thorn, of course, looking for the Arkenstone, but doesn't say anything. And then you get to tell us a little bit about
the least talked about, most important thing ever.
The least talked about, most important thing. I love that. It's a good way of putting it. And now you get to tell us a little bit about the weapons and armor they find. This is a really neat passage.
Yeah, all right. Now the dwarves took down mail and weapons from the walls and armed themselves. Royal indeed did Thorin look, clad in a coat of gold-plated rings, with a silver-hafted axe and a belt crusted with scarlet stones. "Mr. Baggins," he cried, "here is the first payment of your reward. Cast off your old coat and put on this." With that, he put on Bilbo a small coat of mail, wrought for some young elf prince long ago. It was of silver steel, which the elves call mithril, and with it went a belt of pearls and crystals. A light helm of figured leather, strengthened beneath with hoops of steel, and studded about the brim with white gems, was set upon the hobbit's head. "I feel magnificent," he thought, "but I expect I look rather absurd. How they would laugh on the hill at home. Still, I wish there was a looking-glass handy."
They sure would. Sandyman would especially laugh.
Oh, yeah. Sandyman would not be impressed.
Sandyman is not impressed. There's the meme for you right there. Sandyman is not impressed.
Yeah.
So the dwarves finally arm themselves. I just thought this is interesting that they made it this far, and now they finally find some weapons and armor.
And now they finally have some gear. I know. It's about time, guys.
Yeah.
And Thorin finally looks the part, doesn't he?
This is like, you know, they're kind of getting to the end of the Dungeons and Dragons adventure and getting all their loot before the adventure's really over. But they can only carry what they can carry. Yeah. This is really pretty cool moment. Thorin looks just downright kingly, you know? I can't imagine how amazing he would look. And of course, this is probably, you know, his father's or his grandfather's armor.
I'm sure. Yeah,
gold-plated rings. I mean, there's not going to be too many of those.
that's not ordinary dwarf armor. You know, he recognized the heirlooms of his house,
yes,
or at least whatever was not, you know, on his grandfather,
shredded
or his father's
and melted
back when they left.
Yeah, that's true. And then of course,
or that they were wearing when they escaped and took with them. You know,
that's true too.
Yeah, it's a very cool moment. We finally get to see them kind of step into this role of heroes that. Not quite heroes, but of adventurers that they've been, you know, sort of been playing at all this time.
And then, of course, we get the mithril coat. Yeah.
The mithril coat.
And the belt and the light helm.
Yeah.
I love that.
On the helm, I have to give a little bit of information here. I won't take too much time on this, but I have to give a hat tip to our listener, Jez, who's a leather worker. And I reached out to him for some information on what this leather helm might have looked like.
Oh, the figured leather, yeah.
Yeah. So figured leather basically means that it was, you know, worked with some sort of a pattern or characters that were embossed onto the leather. There's a 7th century Anglo-Saxon helmet called the Benty Grange helmet that was discovered in the 19th century. So it probably would have been, you know, kind of current for Tolkien. That seems like the right shape. It's sort of a skull cap shape with an iron frame.
Okay.
the plates have decayed because it was they think it was actually horn, and the horn has just decayed over time. But at the time when Tolkien was writing, researchers actually believed that the plates were leather instead of horn.
Okay.
And so this could be something like what Tolkien is thinking of.
Wow.
I'll look for some pictures.
Yeah.
I've actually got some pictures, but I'll look for some pictures to post up on the website so people can see this.
Yeah,
it's
put them
pretty
in our
cool.
show notes.
And there is actually a recreation of this helmet that even has the studs around the brim, just like Tolkien describes. I mean, it totally looks like Bilbo's helm, except they've reconstructed it with horn plates instead of leather. But pretty cool.
Well, and if there wasn't one, Jez could make it for us.
Well, and even as I was
man.
talking to him about it on Facebook, he kind of ended the conversation with like, "I think I want to make one of these now."
Yep.
So
his stuff is phenomenal.
Pretty cool stuff. His stuff is phenomenal. Actually, we should put up some
put a link
some
to
pictures and maybe a link to
Ancestor Leathercrafts. That's his.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good stuff
for some of his stuff. But big hat tip to Jez for that. That was pretty cool.
Definitely. And then Bilbo, I love this. This is really interesting. Again, words mean things, right? Tolkien uses his words intentionally. So Bilbo says he feels magnificent. You remember last chapter when he told Smaug, "What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds."
Right,
Though
yeah.
I probably said waistcoat when we read that. So, my apologies. Here he has a belt of pearls and crystals and a helm with white gems, and he feels magnificent. Now, is that a linguistic coincidence?
It can't be.
I don't think so. No.
There's no way.
Especially one chapter to the next. I mean, this is, just moments after.
That's a great catch.
It really is. I don't mean it was a great catch like, woohoo, I'm so great. I just mean it's a fascinating little detail.
I hadn't picked up on it. And there's an interesting dichotomy here between how he feels about the way he looks and what he thinks people would say back home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Typical Hobbit humility, though. I mean, I think he thinks about that, and it puts him back in his place a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because we learn in the next line that he had kept his head more clear of the bewitchment of the horde.
Yes.
Which is an important piece.
Some part of him is still thinking clearly through all of this. Yep.
And clearly the dwarves are not.
Right.
Now, we'd already talked about the fact that Mithril had earlier been described as silvered steel. Mm-hmm. But there's an interesting discussion in Rateliff about Tolkien's preference for silver over gold as a precious metal. This is really interesting. Mm-hmm. He points out Bilbo's silver-plated steel here, of course, but he also mentions the Scepter of Annúminas, which was over 5,000 years old when Elrond gave it to Aragorn. Mm-hmm. The Elendilmere, 3,000 years old. We'll get to that in Unfinished Tales. The horn from Scatha's Horde that Éowyn gives to Merry, that's about 1,000 years old at that point.
Okay,
and even the silver strings we just saw on the harps that Fili and Kili play. And interestingly, Rateliff reminds us that Tolkien, conveniently, because he loved silver, ignored the fact that unlike gold, which is really imperishable, doesn't tarnish, doesn't disintegrate, silver just doesn't last that long.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It tarnishes and eventually it just disintegrates. But, you know, his book, his rules. So
fair enough, yeah.
I mean, after all, he's got birds talking in their own languages and people genetically transmitted the knowledge of language.
Oh, well, now we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's an interesting catch. I always liked the fact that he focused so much on silver.
I did too. I don't know. There's something cool about it. There's something.
Yeah, I don't know. Because, it always makes me think back, even all the way back to like Telperion and Laurelin. Silver just seems somehow more elvish. It seems more fairy in a way.
Just a little bit, doesn't it? You're right.
And so there's something kind of more magical about silver. I don't know, for some reason.
That's an interesting. We'll have to.
Even though none of the things you've just described were actual magical artifacts, but it's I don't know. It feels symbolic.
Well, yeah, and they're all very symbolic artifacts.
Yeah, that's true.
Those are major pieces of history right there.
Yeah, tokens of power. Scepters and the Elendilmeres and things. Yeah,
and even the horn.
Yeah,
interesting. So the dwarves are becoming bewitched of the horde. Mm-hmm. So now we probably don't have time to touch on this today because we're going to cover dragon sickness again later. But boy, this is dragon sickness, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I love.
I guess we can touch on it a little bit, right?
Well, we'll probably talk a lot more about it later. But one of the things that I love is just the fact that Bilbo's thought that he has in contrast to this is how he'd rather just have a drink of something cheering out of one of Beorn's wooden bowls. Yeah. When all these dwarves are bewitched by the horde,
the gold and the
Bilbo is
silver
going back to those homey comforts that he's missing. And I would dare say that it's probably the fact that he loves those comforts so much that keeps him mostly immune to the treasure lust. Not entirely, but mostly immune to it.
I'm reminded of
Thorin's
the
comment. Thorin's comment from the end.
Actually, no. I'm actually reminded of an entirely different mythology. I'm thinking of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I can see Bilbo saying that he wants Beorn's wooden bowls, and I can see the Guardian saying, "You have chosen wisely."
Yeah, the wooden cup of Christ
instead of all the gold and the Holy Grail,
big fancy gold and jeweled ones. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
I don't know why that just literally just came to me. Probably awesome. Because we have one of our listeners has his Facebook, photo as
the knight. Yeah, the Guardian. Yeah. That's a good catch. I was thinking of Thorin's comment, the if more of us valued food and cheer and song.
I love that. I can't wait till we get to that. That's such a beautiful line. It so wraps up the philosophy. It really. I think it's a glimpse of Tolkien himself right there.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's everything that hobbits represent.
Yes.
Is that value of food and cheer instead of all this amazing
material
treasure.
Wealth.
Yeah.
Because what good is that material wealth if you don't have friends to share it with, if you don't have a home to relax in and to have your friends over and to enjoy time with?
Yeah, exactly.
That really is one of the most amazing quotes in the entire book, and I'm looking forward to
it is,
that.
And I think we're probably going to have to read it in unison so that we don't have to fight over it.
Yeah, you're right. I'll read it first, and then you can read it after. And,
there you go. There you go. No, I want to read it first. No. We've got time to figure that out.
There you go.
But yeah, I think dragon sickness, maybe we'll probably get into that a little bit more when it's actually mentioned, right?
Yeah, that's true. This isn't explicit, but it certainly is. That's what this is.
Yeah.
So.
And we talked a little bit about, what we saw after Glaurung was killed. The fact that, Hurin found Mime, the petty dwarf, hanging out in Nargothrond, fingering the gold and the gems, letting them run ever through his hands. That's almost exactly some of the same language we see here.
Oh, yeah. Fingering. Yeah. Boy, you're absolutely right. Letting it through their fingers, they're fingering the treasures, caressing and fingering them. Wow. Combine that with letting them run through their hands. It's exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And so, we can talk maybe at another time about whether the dragon spirit actually lingers over the treasure, if there actually has some sort of effect on people.
Sure.
Clearly, it creates, it leaves some sort of, There's lingering
power
something behind. Yeah.
How powerful it is a question, right? Is it resistible?
That's a good
kind
question.
of the point.
Yeah,
that it really is the question, isn't it? Just like the curse of the dragon is. How
and it may be
resistible
something that dwarves are much more susceptible to than others.
I believe they are. I believe we learned somewhere, and I can't remember where. But before we get to that chapter, we'll have to research that they are
definitely
for some reason more susceptible to that.
Definitely.
Well, Bilbo, of course, still thinking clear-headed, reminds Thorin, "Excuse me, this treasure is not yet yours. We are, we need to get out of here, really." And by the way, that's nice armor, but it's not going to do you much good against the dragon because I'm pretty sure your ancestors were wearing the exact same armor when they got toasted 171 years ago.
171 years ago. This armor did not protect you then.
Yeah.
It's not going to protect you
now. It's not going to protect you now if Smaug comes back, so let's get going.
They needed some of those fireproof masks. Remember Turin and some of the dwarves in the first age had those fireproof masks.
Oh, yeah.
They needed some of those, or they needed to be wearing them.
Well, yeah, they might have had them. Maybe they were in the jars.
Maybe the problem was that all the armor was hanging up on the wall.
That would be a problem. They were all just, hanging out, having baths or something like that. It was bath night. Yeah. It was the second Tuesday of the 6th month, so it was bath night. So it was mansions.
Well done. Yeah.
Smaug knew. This is the night to attack.
Yep.
Taking their annual bath.
Yep.
So
that's hilarious.
Oh goodness,
Man. Yeah.
So, they are making their way through. Thorin's doing a pretty good job. He remembers how to get in and out of this place. He remembers the route. He remembers everything. I do think there's something interesting about the fact that they cover their mail again with their old cloaks. There's something symbolic about, we're back to what we were before, the adventurers.
Yeah.
They've got something underneath them, underneath
to
those
protect
cloaks
them,
now.
but outwardly,
Yeah,
they're
they look like they did
acknowledging
before.
that they're. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
kind of cool.
it's subtle.
Yeah.
It's subtle. But as they're heading out, Bilbo is just absolutely getting work. Probably because he's wearing like an 8,000-pound suit of armor.
Probably. At least it's not Mercury, Bilbo.
That's right. Count your lucky stars there, buddy. So here we go. Bilbo was just feeling that he could go on no longer when suddenly the roof sprang high and far beyond the reach of their torchlight. A white glimmer could be seen coming through some opening far above, and the air smelt sweeter. Before them, light came dimly through great doors that hung twisted on their hinges and half burnt. "This is the great chamber of Thror," said Thorin. "The hall of feasting and of council. Not far off now is the front gate." They passed through the ruined chamber. Tables were rotting there. Chairs and benches were lying there overturned, charred and decaying. Skulls and bones were upon the floor, among flagons and bowls and broken drinking horns and dust. As they came through yet more doors at the further end, a sound of water fell upon their ears, and the gray light grew suddenly more full. "There is the birth of the running river," said Thorin. "From here it hastens to the gate. Let us follow it." Out of a dark opening in a wall of rock there issued a boiling water, and it flowed swirling in a narrow channel, carved and made straight and deep by the cunning of ancient hands. Beside it ran a stone-paved road, wide enough for many men abreast. Swiftly along this they ran, and round a wide-sweeping turn, and behold! Before them stood the broad light of day. In front there rose a tall arch, still showing the fragments of old carven work within, worn and splintered and blackened though it was. A misty sun sent its pale light between the arms of the mountain, and beams of gold fell on the pavement at the threshold. I know we don't often do just landscape-type descriptions, but I love that passage.
It's a really cool moment.
It really, really is. I love that there's the spring of the running river right there. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how the dwarves have kind of, nursed it with this narrow channel that they've carved and made straight, so it really starts getting going fast.
So it can really flow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love this. And the big stone-paved road. This must be quite a feat of engineering, really.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, the dwarves,
Yeah. Well, dwarves. Yeah.
It's kind of their thing.
It really is. No doubt about that.
There's a really neat contrast here between all of this, the beauty of that scene, and then the next sentence, which I know we're not going to read, but the bats and the
and the slime
their feet
of
slithering
the dragon.
on stones and the slime of the dragon. There's like a real contrast of the sort of the beauty and the engineering. With this corruption and this filth,
Well, you're not kidding. That's a good catch too. That is an instant reminder of the threat
of the not at home. The notion of not at home.
Absolutely.
This is not quite your home anymore.
No,
it could be again, but it needs to be cleaned
maybe.
up.
But you need to kill a dragon to make that happen.
You need to kill a dragon. You need to clean it up. You need to
or
scrub
somebody else needs to kill a dragon.
Yeah.
That could work too. Or the dragon could just leave.
Yeah, just go off somewhere.
Go away.
Else. I'm done.
Go on. I'm trying to think of
was that a subtle Monty Python reference there?
I'm sure it was, but I can't remember to what, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Okay. It also reminds me a little bit of the Chamber of Mazarbul in Moria.
A little bit, with the light coming from the ceiling someplace far off.
Yeah. And again, this idea of this very important, what used to be a really important room in a great hall. And I guess this is really going back to Thror's chamber a couple paragraphs ago. But now this chamber's full of bones and broken gear and decay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't have the language from Fellowship in front of me, but I know it talks about.
Oh, I'm sure it's very similar.
The bones and broken swords and things like that.
Mm-hmm. That is a strong resemblance, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So they get outside. It's cold. That's the first thing Bilbo notices is, wow, it's cold.
Yeah.
We're late in the year, and it's late in the day. Of course it's cold, but hey, we need to find a safe place. This is probably not the safest place to hang out.
No. And by the way, we need to eat.
Yeah. I shouldn't say late in the day. It's actually early in the day. My mistake there. He recognizes based on the position of the sun that it's late morning. But he realizes we probably shouldn't be here to eat. So
right.
He suggests we find someplace else. And what does Balin have to say about that?
And Balin has a place that he suggests, the old lookout post at the southwest corner, and then I'll pick up there and start reading.
Yeah.
How far is that? Asked the Hobbit. In 5 hours' march, I should think. It will be rough going. The road from the gate along the left edge of the stream seems all broken up. But look down there. The river loops suddenly east across Dale in front of the ruined town. At that point there was once a bridge, leading to steep stairs that climbed up the right bank, and so to a road running towards Raven Hill. There is, or was, a path that left the road and climbed up to the post. A hard climb, too, even if the old steps are still there. Dear me, grumbled the Hobbit. More walking and more climbing without breakfast. I wonder how many breakfasts and other meals we have missed inside that nasty, clockless, timeless hole. As a matter of fact, 2 nights and the day between had gone by, and not altogether without food, since the dragon smashed the magic door. But Bilbo had quite lost count, and it might have been 1 night or a week of nights for all he could tell. Come, come, said Thorin, laughing. His spirits had begun to rise again, and he rattled the precious stones in his pockets. Don't call my palace a nasty hole. You wait till it has been cleaned and redecorated. That won't be till Smaug's dead, said Bilbo glumly.
Well, yeah, there is that. And I'm just thinking, who's he got as a decorator? I mean, cleaned and redecorated.
Cleaned and redecorated.
We got Martha Stewart. She's going to come by.
I've got a lady. She cleans and redecorates all my dwarven ruins.
All my dwarven mansions.
Yeah. It's neat. It's neat to see Thorin, in such a jovial spirit.
Yeah, it's actually rare, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
I mean, he doesn't really even seem insulted. He's just saying, "Don't call my palace a nasty hole." You wait.
That's true. Yeah.
He's not mean about it like you'd expect him to be.
You do expect him to be insulted, by
the
referring
way,
to his palace as a clockless, timeless hole.
Clockless. Interesting that he says nasty, clockless, timeless hole. That's timeless. Doesn't necessarily have to be clockless. I mean, it is interesting that he specifically mentions its lack of timekeeping devices as a negative trait. But we have to remember, Bilbo has he has a clock on the mantelpiece.
Right.
That if he dusted under it, he would have found the note.
That's true. Right.
Yeah. So, he likes clocks, apparently.
Yeah. Well, and it's a civilizing factor that's not present here.
Yeah. But I have to tell you, it probably doesn't have a clock even when it was civilized.
Probably
I just don't see them being clock people. I don't know why.
No.
Calendar people, maybe. Clock people, probably not.
Well,
actually, we know they're calendar people.
We see how well that works out for them, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Their calendar is so complicated they can't even figure it out themselves.
When's that Durin's Day thing again?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. What next here? Let's see.
The dwarves realize that Smaug could come back any moment, don't they?
Well, I think they're aware of that pretty much the whole time, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they do figure out that they need to kind of get someplace hidden.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember. We wanted to talk briefly about cram, because we're not going to read that, because I want to read that passage after they get to the guardhouse. But they do talk about cram, and Tolkien says that if you want to know what it is, I can only say I don't know the recipe. It is biscuitish. This is why I was so mad at you for calling me the cram to your lembas. Keeps good indefinitely. Is supposed to be sustaining, so apparently I am sustaining. But I am not entertaining. Certainly not entertaining.
That's mostly true. Yeah.
Yeah. Being in fact very uninteresting.
You're entertaining but not sustaining.
I'm definitely not a chewing exercise. Really, I just want to draw the line right there. But cram is one of those words that I think probably requires a touch of word nerdery, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it probably can take a little bit. Interestingly, although it is a mannish food, and it seems really, for all intents and purposes, to be the mannish answer to lembas, and it sort of is, it's actually an elvish word. The etymologies, which is now published in The Lost Road, lists a root crab, K-R-A-B, meaning press. And that yielded a Noldorin, or what would later be called the Sindarin language, word of cramb, C-R-A-M-B, or cram, C-R-A-M, meaning a cake of compressed flour or meal, often containing honey and milk, used on a long journey. So we've got part of the recipe there. But so that is in the etymology, so we know it's an elvish word. Christopher Tolkien actually says that this is an added entry, by which I think he means that it was added after The Hobbit was written, because, a lot of the stuff in that etymologies is a bit earlier.
Right.
And cram is called cram in the first edition, unlike mithril. So, it was probably added sometime after The Hobbit was first published.
Interesting.
It is a mannish food, but an elvish word. And it's interesting that although within the universe, lembas was used by elves of the First Age, and so I think I rightly call it a mannish sort of answer to lembas. But actually, Lembas didn't even appear in Tolkien's early writings about the First Age. Tolkien didn't actually write about Lembas until Of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin, which was 1951.
That's true.
So, in universe, Lembas came first, because we know Melian had it back in the First Age.
Right.
But
linguistically, Cram came first.
Linguistically, Cram came first, and out of Tolkien's mind, Cram came first. Yeah.
Well, interesting, because I actually, Rateliff explains this a little bit more, and he thinks that the Cram entry, or that crab entry, was really like an afterthought. He talks about how it really seemed extraordinary for Tolkien to make the Noldorin word and the English word so similar. That cram, the Old English ancestor, he says cramian, which means to squeeze in or to stuff.
Okay.
So, it was like Darwinian. Remember the discussion we had about Darwinian and how it sounded
he actually had
like
another inspiration for it, and then he kind of came up with an elvish explanation for it.
That sounded like wine. Well, in this case, we actually get in a draft passage for Lord of the Rings that Rateliff cites. This is out of History of Middle-earth, Volume 6. Cram was, as you may remember, a word in the language of the men of Dale and the Long Lake.
Oh, wow.
Bilbo Baggins brought back the recipe, and then he talks about all these other things. And then, of course, Rateliff mentions what you just mentioned about Christopher Tolkien, noting that this was a later edition.
So maybe it was much later. Maybe it wasn't after The Hobbit, as I was thinking. It might have been much later than that.
Well, yeah, he thinks that this was, that it was Tolkien's final decision. There's a line in Lord of the Rings. Gimli says, I thought it was only a kind of cram, such as the Dalemen make for journeys in the wild.
Right.
So it is, the elves answered, but we call it lembas or waybread, and it is more strengthening than any food made by men, and it's more pleasant than cram by all accounts. Clearly, they think of lembas as elven and cram as mannish. They don't. To them, it's not an elvish word. It's a mannish word. And Rateliff actually suggests that it seems that Tolkien's final decision was to have cram be a mannish word, and that the elvish etymology was just a moot alternative that he abandoned. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know whether there's anything behind that, but I thought it was interesting because it gave us a chance to disagree. And of course, if we disagree, then I have to play this.
No, you're right. Fine, yeah, you're right. Well played.
Indeed.
That's a good catch. I should have probably looked at Rateliff on that, because I went straight to the etymologies, as I often do.
And he referenced the etymologies, but I love that little extra dig about, if Tolkien himself says it was a mannish word, then which one is it? It's like we talked about before, which do we take the words the professor seriously? The answer is which words?
Yeah. Every once in a while he does contradict himself.
He sure. Well, when you write that much, it's going to happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Over such a long period of time.
So I'm going to go ahead and read to close out the chapter, and we'll discuss and move on to the bag and all that good stuff. So after they get to the top of the mountain here, the top of the spur, and here we go. Here they found a flat place without a wall on three sides, but backed to the north by a rocky face in which there was an opening like a door. From that door there was a wide view, east and south and west. Here, said Balin, in the old days we used always to keep watchmen, and that door behind leads into a rock-hewn chamber that was made here as a guard-room. There were several places like it round the mountain, but there seemed small need for watching in the days of our prosperity, and the guards were made over-comfortable, perhaps. Otherwise we might have had longer warning of the coming of the dragon, and things might have been different. Still, here we can now lie hid and sheltered for a while, and can see much without being seen. Not much use if we've been seen coming here, said Dori, who was always looking up towards the mountain's peak, as if he expected to see Smaug perched there like a bird on a steeple. We must take our chance of that, said Thorin. We can go no further today. Hear, hear, cried Bilbo, and flung himself on the ground. In the rock chamber there would have been room for 100, and there was a small chamber further in, more removed from the cold outside. It was quite deserted. Not even wild animals seemed to have used it in all the days of Smaug's dominion. There they laid their burdens, and some threw themselves down at once and slept. But the others sat near the outer door and discussed their plans. In all their talk they came perpetually back to one thing. Where was Smaug? They looked west, and there was nothing. And east there was nothing. And in the south there was no sign of the dragon, but there was a gathering of very many birds. At that they gazed and wondered, but they were no nearer understanding it when the first cold stars came out.
Wow.
Yeah. My goodness.
Very cool.
It really is. I mean, I'm picturing this amazing panoramic view, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
This rocky flat place with no walls on three sides, but backed up against the spur of the mountain.
Yeah.
Just commanding.
And just this view.
Yeah.
This view of everything. Yeah.
What a tactical advantage here if you're dealing with an ordinary army as opposed to a dragon.
Right. Obviously, it wasn't very useful against a dragon, but
It is interesting.
but then again, what can you do against a dragon?
Yeah, well, Balin suggests that they might have at least had more warning if the guards hadn't been so comfortable. That's
True. Yeah.
Seems a little harsh, but, really, what would they have been able to do?
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't have called them on their cell phones. I don't know if they would have had some sort of communication system.
Maybe they could have gotten some of the treasure out. I can't really imagine.
Semaphore. They're out there with semaphore flags, and they're signaling. D?
That's a funny thought. Is that a D or an X? I can't tell. I don't know enough semaphore to know whether D and X are at all similar.
I barely remember
or
the word
any
semaphore.
actually.
Yeah,
I know no
that's
semaphore.
Exactly right. None. But, in the original manuscript, Balin didn't say that. He actually just lamented that it was the lack of a north view that was the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, of course, evil things would come from the north.
Right, because that's where the Withered Heath was.
Right.
So, huge place, though. Big enough for 100.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
With a smaller chamber deeper in.
Yeah.
Interesting that it's been completely abandoned.
Yeah.
Animals have avoided the place.
That's interesting.
All the time that the dragon's been there. Mm-hmm. It's a cool scene.
It is. I would have liked to have seen this.
Yeah. It just forebodes so much of.
That last couple of lines
so much darkness
really
to come.
forebodes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this notion about the fact that there was the gathering of many birds and that they gazed and wondered. Well,
that's a good point. Yeah. Like, what are these birds gathering for?
They're foreboding war.
Yeah.
That's really.
And we'll see this image again in the next chapter too. The birds gathering for war. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, they will. Well, that'll do it for our chapter discussion. But please, folks, stick around. We've got some really good stuff coming up in Parliament's Bag.
Yeah, please wait around for that. We've got a fun question about that other ruined dwarvish kingdom that everybody loves hearing so much about that we mentioned. But first, an announcement.
That's right. Assuming this isn't the first time you've listened to us, ever, you've heard us say that we've been invited to Mythmoot 5 as special guests. It takes place June 21st to 24th, 2018, at the beautiful National Conference Center in Leesburg, Virginia. Truly an incredible opportunity.
Now, Mythmoot is a combination literary conference and fan convention sponsored by Signum University. It's actually even more than that, but it's primarily about enjoying one another's company while we celebrate and engage with these stories we love. Mm-hmm. Alan and I are both very excited and a little terrified about it.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're going to be doing a live episode broadcast from Mythmoot.
That's right. We're going to be in the main room and the only event in our time slot.
And we'll be joined by some special guests, including John Garth, Corey Olson, Douglas Anderson, and Mark Ockrand.
And the show will air live on Facebook at the time of the event. Our time slot is Saturday, June 23rd at 1 o'clock Eastern. I believe that's 6 o'clock UTC. Then the episode will release the next day-ish as episode 88.
And if we stay on schedule, that's going to be happening right as we're wrapping up The Hobbit and getting ready for Season 3.
And it's a perfect chance to come see us live. So find out more and register before May 31st. You're going to do that at tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/Mythmoot5. It's actually Mythmoot V because they're really intelligent people. It's Mythmoot V. That's MYTHMOOTV. Now, Mythmoot's generously covering our event registration and meals, as well as our Roman numeral tutorials. And I kid.
I know most of my Roman numerals up to 10.
There you go.
Most of them up to 10.
I can read most of the, at the end of a movie, I can figure out what year it was, usually.
There you go.
1634, I think, was the movie I just watched the other day. Wait a minute. That doesn't seem right. Anyway, folks.
The dialect is so hard when you're watching a movie that
It really is. It really is.
All the
Old
V's
English
and
with,
nows, yeah.
It's Old English with Middle English subtitles. It's really hard to read. Okay, that's really bad. We totally digress.
Yeah.
So, we've told you this before, of course, but it's worth recapping. Mythmoot's covering our event registration and our meals. And thanks to you, many of you who bought a T-shirt during our recent fundraiser, we've been seeing pictures, by the way. Keep sending them in. We've got our airfare covered, but we still have the hotel to pay for. And although the conference center does have some excellent group rates for us, we are but humble podcasters.
So now we hope that you'll help us out the rest of the way by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. That's our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. We are getting very close to our next goal, which is where we were hoping to be before we did a live episode from a mood anyway.
That's right. And as always, we trust you all will help us, at least those of you who can. In fact, we've had a few of you sign on at the higher tiers this month, and we want to thank you very much. We're grateful for all you've done. Thanks to our Patreon family, we've made some big improvements to the show, including our move to weekly episodes. Now, of course, we want to make it worth your while, so we have some really fun rewards, like some exclusive content.
Like our postscripts to each episode. After we record each episode, we listen to it before it releases to see if we left out any good insights, good jokes, or bad ones, embarrassing mistakes, and we put all those into, about 7 to 10 minute postscript that's available to our Patreon supporters.
Sometimes 6, sometimes 15, but, we try to aim for about 10.
Yeah.
And those exclusive postscripts typically release the same day as the episode it follows, so you can listen to the show and then immediately tune in and listen to the postscript, so it's almost like it's the same experience. If you want access to those bonuses, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. Next, we want to give a very special shout-out to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. To May in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Dawn in Vancouver Island, and Emily in Texas. Thank you all. Now, folks, if you want a personalized shout-out in our episodes, well, you know where to go.
But we don't want you to feel obligated by any means. We'd love to have you in the Fellowship of the Podcast, but only if you can afford it and only if you think we've earned it. If not, don't worry about it. We're grateful to have you listening to us, and we want you to keep listening, because we're sure going to keep talking.
Just you try to stop us. Well, Sean, why don't we go ahead and get on with Barliman's bag? Our first item in the bag is a comment, not a question. It came to us from our good friend Tom H., he of the Balrog Wings essay.
Oh, yes.
Writing to us today from somewhere in the west of Middle-earth, livin' La Vida Loca.
Actually, what he put down there, that's fantastic. Order me a mojito, Tom. I'll be right there. Tom wrote to us in regards to a little timeline conundrum we talked about back in episode 69, I think. And I think it came up again since then, in regards to the ages of Fili and Kili.
Oh, yeah.
The Hobbit says that Fili is the youngest of all the dwarves, but then Appendix A to Lord of the Rings says that Fili was born in 2859, while Kili is 5 years younger, 2864. Tom says, I was listening to you discuss the problem of the relative ages of Fili and Kili. It occurred to me that it's possible to question the accuracy of the dates in the genealogy in Appendix A, since there also seems to be a problem there with the dates of Dwalin. According to Appendix A, he lived to be 340, which vastly exceeds the lifespans of all the other dwarves mentioned.
Yeah.
Christopher Tolkien makes the point about the disparity between the lifespans of Dwalin and others of Durin's house in the Peoples of Middle-earth. That's home.
History of Middle-earth, yeah.
History of Middle-earth, sorry. Volume 12.
We use abbreviations for everything.
All the time. History of Middle-earth, Volume 12, page 288. He also notes that while there is always a date for Dwalin's death in all the versions of the tables, the first version seems to give a date that would put Dwalin's death at 251 years of age, and so early in the Fourth Age, a dozen years or so after the end of Lord of the Rings. I think this allows room, and this is still Tom talking here, to doubt the accuracy of Appendix A, where it is explicitly contradicted by the text of The Hobbit. Imagining a typo of 2859 for 2869 resolves the problem.
Sure.
So I do see what he's talking about in Peoples of Middle-earth. Christopher Tolkien does talk about the possibility of an error in the appendix about Dwalin's date of death. So, I don't know, Alan, what say you? Does this give us reason to doubt the accuracy of the appendix when it's contradicted by the text of The Hobbit?
Well, or even if it wasn't necessarily contradicted, but yeah, I would say so. I mean, the notion of a dwarf living to 340 years of age is entirely outlandish in Tolkien's world. And in Peoples of Middle-earth, now that's volume 12 of History of Middle-earth, we learn the average lifespan of a dwarf was 250 years, and that while they might exceed that, a dwarf of 300 was about as rare and aged as a man of 100. 40 years beyond that seems to suggest some sort of error in transcribing dates, especially because I think they listed all the dwarves of the royal houses, and they were all between like 260 and 280 years of age. I mean, they were all in that range.
They were all right around that 250 mark.
Yeah, none of them were close to 300 even.
Right.
I would have to say Appendix A may not be entirely trustworthy when it comes to those particular dates.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, and I have to say thanks, Tom, for bringing that to our attention. I mean, clearly the appendices are certainly a useful resource. We use them all the time, but I guess we'd have to say when contradicted by the actual text, I think we probably should be going with the text, especially considering here this is something that's actually in Thorin's dialogue. So Fili, I would have to say probably most likely the youngest.
Yeah, I'd probably concur with that. Our second question comes to us, second something. First one was a comment, so our first question, but our second piece of information tonight comes to us from Olaf in the Netherlands, who, along with Tom, is enjoying the priority handling that Barliman gives to our Patreon supporters at the Legacy of Lothlorien level and higher. Olaf is reading Lord of the Rings again.
You're supposed to wait for us, Olaf.
I know, seriously. We're starting it up in just a few months.
Yeah, very soon.
And he had of course, we're going to move at a pretty glacial pace, so
that's true.
You could probably read
Olaf,
it 10 times.
Go ahead and read it now for enjoyment, and then you can plod along with us for the next...
Plod's about right.
8 years.
And Olaf had an observation about that other famous abandoned dwarf kingdom. When I came to the part in Moria, I suddenly realized something odd, which you could maybe shine a light on. I believe that the first time that Frodo, or any others, hear Smaug is in Moria. However, he can't have followed them from the gates at Holland. Does this mean that Smaug was already in Moria before the Fellowship got there? Why was he there? And was it an accident he came upon the Fellowship, or was it an instance of fate? After the Fellowship escapes Moria, there's another of these instances. I haven't read as far yet, so I might misremember something. I believe that they don't hear or see anything from Smaug from their escape on until after they set away on the Anduin from Lothlorien. Does that mean he's been waiting patiently on the borders? How is he able to track the ring-bearer down again and again, even in Moria and when the bearer is in the land of Galadriel? Now, Sean, you agreed to look into this one, so what have you got?
Well, strangely enough, I think I've got an answer that doesn't require any speculation at all.
Oh, an easy answer.
I know. Let's go back to those troublesome appendices for a moment. Appendix B tells us that in August 3018, now this is the month before Frodo actually left Bag End for his quest, the appendix says, all trace of Gollum is lost. It is thought that about this time, being hunted both by the elves and Sauron's servants, he took refuge in Moria. But when he had at last discovered the way to the West Gate, he could not get out.
So he hid in Moria and couldn't escape, and apparently picked up the trail of the Fellowship while they were there?
Yes, exactly. And the hunt for the ring in Unfinished Tales actually gives us a little more detail about Gollum's time that I think answers Olaf's questions. So it says, what then happened to Gollum cannot of course be known for certain. He was peculiarly fitted to survive in such straits, though at cost of great misery. But he was in great peril of discovery by the servants of Sauron that lurked in Moria, especially since such bare necessity of food as he must have, he could only get by thieving dangerously. No doubt he had intended to use Moria simply as a secret passage westward, his purpose being to find Shire himself as quickly as he could. But he became lost, and it was a very long time before he found his way about. It thus seems probable that he had not long made his way towards the West Gate when the 9 walkers arrived. He knew nothing, of course, about the action of the doors. To him they would seem huge and immovable, and though they had no lock or bar and opened outwards to a thrust, he did not discover that. In any case, he was now far away from any source of food, for the orcs were mostly in the east end of Moria, and was become weak and desperate, so that even if he had known all about the doors, he still could not have thrust them open. It was thus a piece of singular good fortune for Gollum that the 9 walkers arrived when they did.
Well, that tells us it was a bit of fate or good luck for Gollum that he came upon the Fellowship. I mean, at least for him.
He would have starved to death pretty soon.
Yeah. So I think that answers all of Olaf's questions except one, about how Gollum was able to track down the ring-bearer even in Lothlorien. Now, I noticed that same section. In Unfinished Tales, it says that it was the lure of the ring that made Gollum dare to go near Lorien at all. So I have to think that it was the ring that was drawing him to Frodo once he got close enough.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I agree.
Good. Well, of course you agree. I'm right.
Just glad you didn't play the audio clip again. And don't.
I didn't. I don't want to beat that up. I don't want to end up with it being the beginning is a very good place to start, or any of the other things that I've just beat till they're unrecognizable, like Feanor, even.
Yeah, right. Like that poor Feanor pinata that's hanging up in your booth.
Oh, goodness. That is hilarious. Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you, Olaf. And, folks, that almost wraps it up for another episode of The Prancing Pony. Stick around for just a couple more minutes, though. As always, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again next time when we reach Chapter 14 of The Hobbit.
I predict fire and floods and poisoned fish.
You were always foreboding gloomy things. Great. Now I'm the disbelieving townsfolk to your prophetic bard.
See? First you were the cram, now you're the townsfolk.
Seriously. You were Lembas, and now you're the hero of the story. Yeah, whatever. I need to start writing these bits, apparently. Folks, we invite you to please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to some really good stuff for your Tolkien collection.
And in the meantime, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd be very grateful for that. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to a bigger and more exciting community of Tolkien lovers.
And thank you to those of you who have, by the way. We read every single one of them still, and we really do appreciate all the nice things you say about us, even if we think you must be
Listening to some other podcast.
listening to somebody else. Yeah.
And in fact, we appreciate it so much that we've now started picking out one special review every week to feature on our social media networks as our way of saying thank you. So if you'd like to see your name or your alias, keep it PG please, in lights on our pages, now it's easy. All you have to do is leave us a review.
And make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to the show through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in most any podcast directory, including Spotify now.
And we want to thank all of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everyone could join, and that's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your recipe for authentic Lake Town cram to Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com. Because we all need more biscuity, chewing exercise, unentertaining food.
All of our jaws need to be strengthened for...
Seriously. Oh, like our jaws aren't strengthened enough from weekly hour-and-a-half episodes of
Right.
jawing at the microphone.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll try to get those recipes and questions, thoughts, and comments into our next episode. Well, for about an hour 45 or so, still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.